Control rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive with commands or uniforms. It doesn't need force or threats or punishment. You were never forced. That's why this works. The most effective systems don't tell you what to do. They arrange the environment so that certain behaviors feel natural and others feel unnecessarily difficult. No one has to push you when the structure already decided the direction. What you experience as choice is often navigation within a design you didn't build. This is the architecture of control. For most of history, power relied on force. Rules were enforced visibly. Authority was loud. Resistance was expected. But force is expensive. It creates friction. It invites defiance. Modern systems learned something older empires didn't. Control works best when it's quiet. Today, power doesn't need to dominate you. It only needs to guide behavior without being noticed. When compliance feels voluntary, there is no resistance to overcome. When obedience feels like preference, no one thinks to rebel. The most stable systems don't restrict action, they shape incentives. They don't block the path, they pave it. Most people believe their lives are guided by decisions. In reality, they are guided by defaults. Default settings, default paths, default expectations. What happens automatically rarely feels political or controlling. It feels normal. You can change it, in theory, but theory requires effort. Opting out demands attention. Opting in requires nothing. And so behavior flows in the direction that costs the least energy. This is not coercion, it's efficiency. The system doesn't need to remove alternatives. It only needs to make one option frictionless and the others exhausting. Most people will follow the path that doesn't interrupt their day. Not because they're weak, but because energy is finite. Control today is not about denial. It's about delay. It doesn't tell you no. It asks you to wait, to fill out a form, to repeat a step, to come back later. Each individual barrier is small, insignificant on its own, but together they drain momentum. Resistance rarely ends in confrontation. It ends in fatigue. Not because people are forbidden, but because persistence becomes tiring. The system doesn't stop you, it wears you down. And most people interpret that exhaustion as a personal failure. They don't blame the structure, they blame themselves. The most efficient systems don't rely on enforcement at all. They rely on internalization. Over time, expectations move inward. People begin to anticipate judgment before it happens. They adjust behavior, not because they're watched, but because deviation feels uncomfortable. Metrics replace oversight. Norms replace rules. Social pressure replaces authority. Eventually, no one needs to intervene. Order sustains itself. Control becomes invisible because it has been absorbed. At that point, resistance doesn't look rebellious. It looks strange. Every structure presents itself as logical, efficient, rational, necessary. Systems rarely admit they are designed. They describe themselves as inevitable. This is just how things work. This is what progress looks like. There is no alternative. But no system is neutral. Every structure rewards certain behaviors and discourages others. Every design points somewhere. Outcomes are not accidental. They are the result of incentives aligned over time. When a system claims neutrality, it is usually at its most powerful, because neutrality disarms scrutiny. What feels natural is rarely questioned. Control succeeds not because it is harsh, but because it is convenient. It reduces uncertainty. It simplifies decisions. It removes the burden of thinking. In exchange, it asks for very little. Just participation, just acceptance, just compliance with what already exists. Comfort is the most persuasive argument power has ever used. And most people don't experience control as oppression. They experience it as relief. Relief from friction. Relief from responsibility. Relief from standing apart. The system doesn't need loyalty. It only needs inertia. Freedom does not disappear entirely. It narrows. It moves into the spaces the system doesn't care about. You cannot dismantle the structure from inside it. You cannot outspace it. You cannot escape it completely. But you can see it. And awareness changes how influence works. When you recognize incentives, you stop mistaking them for desire. When you see friction, you stop blaming yourself for resistance. Freedom is not found in rebellion. It is found in precision. In choosing where to comply and where to conserve your energy. In understanding the limits of the structure without pretending they don't exist. Control does not need to be fought to be understood. It doesn't require outrage or urgency or defiance. It only requires attention. Once you see the architecture, you stop confusing design with destiny. From that point forward, the system still exists, but no longer feels invisible. You don't move faster. You move deliberately. You are no longer moving through a mystery. You are moving through a structure you can finally see.